Hello and welcome to the Kings Weekly Podcast. I'm your co-host Nick Agar Johnson, editor-in-chief and staff writer for No Ceilings NBA. We are part of the Believe Network, the Basketball Intelligence Podcast Network, and the Old Man Squad Network. And speaking of that Basketball Intelligence Podcast Network, I am here with my co-host, in addition to our very special guest, but my co-host, the founder and curator of the Basketball Intelligence newsletter, available at basketballintelligence.net, Ray LeBove. Hello there, Ray.
Hello, Nick, and welcome, everybody. And we do indeed have a very special guest today, and that is Keith Pompey, 76ers beat writer from the Philadelphia Inquirer for the past 13 years. Welcome, Keith. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being on here.
So we want to start out in the way we typically start out when we do previews of Kings games and talking about the opponents. And the question that we usually start with is particularly interesting when it comes to the Sixers, because we ask, the guest to talk about the state of the team. And when it comes to the Sixers, if I asked you that question 5 minutes ago or 5 minutes from now, it could be very different. So we'll start with that question. Talk to us about the state of the Sixers.
You know, that's crazy. I mean, it's a great question, a great question. You know what, I would say if I had to describe the Sixers and the state of the Sixers, I would say that the 76ers may be the NBA's most dangerous team. And the reason why I'm saying that is because, you know, I feel like when everything is going right and if they're all healthy and everything, you know, they could beat anyone in the league. But when everything is going bad, they could lose to anyone. Like, so
it's not that they can beat anyone or lose to anyone. They can beat anybody by a lot and lose to anybody by a lot.
Exactly. I do think that. So when we look at the state, you know, they're starting to round everything into form too. Because early on, they were 0-4 in the games where their big three played, and they were losing mightily. And then it's funny, the last two times they played without their big three, they lost both of them, right? The one game they were getting blown out by the Toronto Raptors on the road, and then they came back and lost in overtime. And then on Monday night or Monday afternoon, they go to Charlotte, which is supposed to be an easy victory. They defeated the Hornets, I want to say 11 or 13 consecutive times. And they got smacked in the mouth without Paul George and Joel Embiid. And then the very next night, they smacked the Milwaukee Bucks in the mouth with Embiid and Paul George, who combined to score 61 points. So that's why I say this is probably the most dangerous team in the NBA, because you never know what's going to show up.
So what does the health look like right now for the key players and for the team as a whole?
You know, right now Embiid he's trending in the right way. In the beginning of the season, because of his knee, he could only play, like if he played on a Monday, he couldn't practice or play on Tuesday and Wednesday, and he would come back on Thursday. Talking about practice or play hard. But now, he's not doing back-to-backs, but he can play on a day's rest, right? He'll get 24 hours rest and come back. I will say this. His knee looks better. He's a little bit more fluid on the offensive end. Defensively, he doesn't get the lift. But against the Milwaukee Bucks, he had his first alley-oop since, 2022, and everyone was going crazy, right? So he is being more powerful. So that's telling me that the knee is starting to feel better. Now, when we look at Paul George, he's had some knee swelling as of recently, like last week. But, it seems like when he has these days off, rest, he comes back and he plays phenomenally. I think the big question mark for him is, how is he going to do, if you only have a day in between? And if you do that for extended period of time, are you going to still be as fluent, or is your knee going to swell up again? So those are the big question marks right now when it comes down to Paul George. But Embiid looks good. The only scary part about Embiid, he's looked good before in the past. Like he would play in 6 games, and next thing you know, he misses the next 2 weeks. So it's kind of like everyone has their fingers crossed in the Sixers organization to where he's not going to have any setbacks.
How are you feeling about how those decisions are made in terms of whether to what extent does the training staff have a lot of influence? To what extent is it the player himself, or other factors that come into how those decisions are made? How are you feeling about how that is playing out?
You know what? That's a great question, because there was a game earlier this season where Joel Embiid, they went to overtime, and Joel Embiid really wanted to continue to play. And, the coaching staff was like, yeah, yeah. But the team doctor was like, no, no. And Joel was like, walked away like this. Before that, I always thought that it was a matter of him making the ultimate decision, right? It always came down to him. I think right now is a little bit more collaborative, right? You know what I mean? Now, again, what they do is they'll ask him, how does your knee feel? And if he says it's a little sore or this and that, they're going to shut it down. But there was times where I felt like earlier in the season, they were saving him from himself. You know what I mean? So that's where it is. But it's a little bit more collaborative. But in the past, it was always, I felt like it was Embiid's decision to play or not to play. You know what I mean? He did what he wanted to do.
Well, I think that's a great progress, to involve the medical staff more. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
in fact, who makes the final decision? That's complicated. It's collaborative and all that. But the more you can involve the medical staff, to me, I think that's really an enlightened thing to do.
Yeah. I tell you what, he looks a whole lot better than he has last year. And I guess since he had the knee injury initially 2 seasons ago, right? So he looks better. He's moving more fluid. He still has to get some lateral movement on the defensive end. He has to get his lift up a little bit on the defensive end. But whatever they're doing is working to a point where they're even talking about that they're not rushing it, but there may come a chance where he'll be able to play on back-to-backs. That's going to be, if that happens, that's major because, last year at training camp, he came out and said that he'll never play on back-to-backs again. So the fact that they're saying that there's a possibility that he'll be able to play on back-to-backs is that's great news for the Sixers.
Well, thankfully, he won't have to do that in the playoffs.
Yeah, and then that's when they really, believe me, that's when they really need him. That's when they really need him.
Right. So, Nick, I know you have some things you want to talk about.
Yeah. So the big three and their health is, going to be sort of the main storyline for the Sixers. But, to honor my No Ceilings family, I at least have to bring up how VJ Edgecombe has stepped in and, he started all but 4 games for the Sixers so far. And it's interesting because one of the questions, and I don't think anybody questioned his defense, but one of the questions coming in was, what would his offensive game look like? And obviously he broke the rookie scoring record early on in the season and has continued to be a huge part of things for Philadelphia. So where does the organization stand with VJ? Because they've certainly put a lot of faith in a very young guard immediately.
Yeah, you know what I think the organization is pleased with VJ. You look at him, and it's funny to say the steal of the draft when you have a guy who won 3rd overall pick. But a lot of them think that they had possibly the steal of the draft just because of the fit that he is with Tyrese Maxey. And when you talk about, we all knew defensively he was a quality defender where he's going to get steals, and we all knew that he was extremely athletic. But the knock on him was, can he shoot? No one thought he could shoot the 3. He's shooting 37.2% from 3-point land. He's and then also there are times, another thing that people thought was he can't handle the ball. He's going to get stripped left and right in the NBA. And you see at various times throughout the game where he's bringing the ball up and Maxey is playing a 2 guard, right? So he's showing you a lot of things. The one thing that I will say to you guys that really impressed me about him is he doesn't come across as a rookie as far as confidence wise, poise wise. I remember the first game of the season, and it was shoot around. And I'm like, come on, dude. But I asked him at shoot around, I said, hey, this is your first game. You're playing at TD Garden against the Boston Celtics. Do you have any butterflies? Could you sleep well last night? Did you have to call anyone? What's going on? What happened? And he says, I didn't talk to anyone. I slept well. And I'm like, okay, this guy's a rookie. He's trying to, like make it seem like he's overconfident. He dropped 34 points, right? And you're like, well, maybe he did sleep well, right? So then the one thing that really stands out to me too, another thing is he's the type of guy who he may struggle for 3 quarters. Let's say 3.5 quarters. But when it comes down to the clutch, he's going to make the right play. Like there's been several times where he struggled and then the ball swung to him in the 4th quarter. And next thing you know, he hits 3 threes or something like that. Or he'll come up with a clutch block or a steal or things like that. So it's kind of like typically you expect a rookie to disappear down the stretch. Whereas he always, even when he's struggling, he tends to make big plays down the stretch. So to me, that's a great trait to have in a young player. And he does that a lot consistently. I mean, he has 2 game-winning baskets for the Sixers so far this season.
Were there any issues with he and Maxey that you noticed a trend of improvement in terms of how they synchronize their games?
You know what? There wasn't really. Now, if I will say this, offensively, I think they work well together because they're both. You would look at it and say they're both similar, right? And what I mean by that is they're both athletic. They like getting out and going and basically going a straight line to the basket. So you typically would figure like, well, one of these guys got to be a better knockdown 3-point shooter, like just a guy who can stretch the floor. Now both of them can shoot the ball, but you would think it. But it works out well. And I think the reason why it works out well is because of, they're just so athletic in their style of play. They get out and go. They're both kind of like unselfish, you know what I mean, to a fault. Now, Maxey is, averaging 29 points, but he gives the ball up. Now, the one thing that I will say that if they need to work on something, Maxey is like one of the league leaders in steals, right? Edgecombe is also up there. I think Maxey might be number 2 or number 3. But it just seems like in regards to giving up straight line drives, they as a unit have to perform better in that. Because when we look at it, there are a lot of guards who get 30-point performances. Like when you look at them. Now, again, you may say these are elite guys, but there have been some dudes that you looked at and said, dang, I didn't even know he was in the league and he got 30, right? So my thing is, what it is it's like the dribble drive, they either kick it out or they score. Now, when it comes down to these 2 guys getting in the passing lanes and getting steals, or VJ blocking a guy's shot after he gets past some stuff like that, he can do that. But if they need to make some improvements as a unit, is they have to stop ball penetration.
So if playing at the pace that they like to play at offensively, and with Embiid's improving health, has that been noticeable in terms of how Embiid fits with playing at that pace? Has that gotten better over the course of the season? I realize it's gotten better in terms of his availability, but in terms of his ability to play at a similar kind of pace or somewhat similar.
You know what? And that's a good question because it has gotten better, right? The one thing that they need to work on, though, there are certain times like the pace has gotten better. Like Embiid is trailing, but you got Paul George getting out, you got Maxey getting out, Edgecombe, and then they kick the ball back to Joel, and he'll hit the 3. Or if they slow it up, Because it is a slower pace now when he's in there, slightly slower, but then they'll run the offense through him. The one area that they need to improve on, there are certain times when Joel Embiid gets it going. And it's great for Joel, but then there are certain times when the ball doesn't move, so everyone else is standing around. Now Maxey get his shot, but Paul George and VJ are just standing around. They got to correct that, because what happens is when Joel goes out, then these guys are cold. They don't have any rhythm, and then the other team is going on the run while they're trying to figure it out. So you notice sometimes you say to yourself like, okay, this is great for Joel, but I'm wondering if how these other guys are going to deal with it. Because, like when you're not really getting a lot of shots, guys tend to start going for self. Instead of moving the ball, then the ball comes to them and they're like hoisting it. You know what I mean? So that's the one thing that
Or even
they
going
have
to
to
the
prevent.
ISO bag some.
Yeah, they go into the ISO bag. Yeah, like I got to get mine. I'm gonna get mine. And they need to correct it. Now, the last couple games, like yesterday's game, it wasn't that way. When they played the Milwaukee Bucks, Joel did 18 points in the first quarter, but next thing you know, when he goes out, other people start eating. Like Maxey was eating, Paul George was eating. VJ did a lot of different things. So yeah, but early on, that was a problem.
Do you have anything further before we, Nick, before we go to the matchups or the what to watch for in the matchup?
Yeah, I had one further player that I wanted to dig in on, which, given the injury issues, if you had told someone who follows the Sixers before the year started that Tyrese Maxey and VJ Edgecombe would be number 1 and number 2 in terms of games started, I don't think many people would have been surprised. If you told people that two-way contract guy Dominick Barlow was 3rd on the team in terms of games started, I think you'd get a little bit more of a surprise. And it's interesting because 3 out of the 4 years that I've been to Summer League, I've seen Dominick Barlow, and he's always been someone who's, acquitted himself quite well in those settings and then gone on to sort of, get a cup of coffee for a team, but not really factor into their plans all that much. Now on a two-way, he's started 30 of 36 games and played significantly more than he had previously in his NBA career. Where's the team at with Barlow in the longer term? I would presume, given how much he's played, that he's about to get his contract converted, but is he someone who is sort of viewed more as, step in case of injury guy, or does he have a longer term future with the team in your mind?
He has a longer term future with the team in my mind. I think the biggest thing now is agreeing to, because if I'm his agent, I'm trying to get him paid. Now,
Yeah.
not like Zach LaVine or Aid or someone like that, but I'm trying to get him a nice contract. So I think there is that negotiation piece that's going to come out. But yeah, he's definitely looked at upon as someone that they look at, long term, because he's a good fit. Like, he's the type of guy that when you look at him, and you are right, he was also always that guy who towards the end of the season, he got his contract converted. And I asked him, why didn't it work out with you for Atlanta? You got it. Well, they got a new general manager. So next thing you know, people want who they want. And he became sort of the odd man out, and he came to the Sixers. But the reason why he is a great fit for the Sixers, I'm going to go old school for you, Nick. And, you may not know who this guy is. Ray and I probably do, right? But when the Sixers won the championship, and I'm not saying that the Sixers are going to win the championship, so let's get that out there. But when they won the championship, their starting power forward was a guy by the name of Mark Ivorone, right? And so what they did was, what he enabled the Sixers to do was, they enabled him to bring Bobby Jones off the bench. Bobby Jones was like the first 6th man of the year. He's a Hall of Famer. But the reason why Mark Ivorone worked is because in the 76ers starting lineup, they had Dr. J. They had Moses Malone. They had a guy by the name of Andrew Toney, who before his foot injuries was a phenomenal 2-guard. And they had Maurice Cheeks. So what that did is you had a guy in the lineup who basically grabbed rebounds, played defense, set picks, did all types of glue guy type of stuff. And then all of a sudden, you could be able to scatter your lineup. You brought Robbie Jones in, who was a much better player. So when I look at Dominick Barlow, I'm not calling him Mark Ivoroni, but he does similar things, right? He's going to play defense. He's going to set picks, but also he's mastered how to move around and get offensive rebounds, right? By crashing the boards and then scoring that way. And then all of a sudden you can bring in, now before it was like Kelly Oubre or somebody else was coming off the bench. So I think that he is the perfect fit, because when you have a team that has a big three, or you can argue a big four, when you add VJ Edgecombe, you don't need somebody that's going to need the ball. You're going to need somebody to do the dirty work. So that's why he is a perfect fit for the 76ers, because he's able to do all those other things that is needed for that the team needs.
It makes me think of a couple of things that people say. One is how much do they accept their role, right? And that's like really important for that kind of player to understand. And the other saying that you've heard a million times is, you don't need to be a great player. You just need to be great in your role, right? And so that's, I think, what makes him the perfect fit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he works out well, and he's a good guy. Like, they love him. I mean, he's playing D, he's hustling. It's funny how you look at it. Like, you say to yourself, like, wow, I can't believe that this guy didn't latch on to another team sooner. Now, again, I know they would convert him, but then he had to prove himself all over again, like each season. But, he's a great player, great player.
And I think part of it as well is, a lot of younger players don't really have a humbling experience until they're sort of later in their careers. Whereas with Barlow, he was a star at Overtime Elite and then goes undrafted. And all of a sudden he's 19 years old and, has to earn his way into a league that, doesn't see him as, oh, this is an incredibly hyped up teenage prospect. Is like, no, this is a guy who from his first minute played in the NBA essentially had to prove himself as, a teenager who didn't have a college contract, who didn't really have that sort of thing to fall back on. It was just, can you get yourself a spot in the league and hang on? And he's certainly done that.
Yeah, he has. You're 100% about that one.
So moving on to some of the sort of matchup stuff, there was one point in particular that I really wanted to focus on because I think it might be rather telling, which is, as of right now, the Sixers are 29th in the league in 2-point percentage. So they're the second worst offense inside the arc. The Kings are the third worst defense in terms of 2-point defense, the third worst defending team inside the arc. So it's a lot of, sort of stoppable force meets a movable object kind of situation. But I'm curious sort of your thoughts. Is the Sixers paint scoring something that is really just, if Joel Embiid plays, we're good at it, and if he doesn't, then we're not? Or do you think there's sort of more of a team-wide concern here rather than just it being determined by whether Joel Embiid plays or not?
It's one that it's funny because I do think that it is better when Joel plays, and the reason being is, and it's crazy, and it's not just because of Joel. I mean, Joel's not doing most of the points, but when you realize it, that Joel is positioned a lot of times at the top of the key or toward the side, and when he draws the double team, people are cutting to the basket, and they're getting these easy layups, so it helps it. But whereas when you have Maxey and and I know they're getting out and running, but Maxey and it shoots threes, he gets to the cup a couple times, but I do think that when you have Embiid out there and PG out there, Paul George, it's harder to defend the Sixers, right? It is. And so whereas guys can roam freely and get it, but yeah, excuse me, when I mean get it, I'm talking about getting the easy baskets. So that's what it is. So it unfortunately, it sounds crazy to say, is it just Joel Embiid? But that's true. It's his presence. It's what's making it better. And if you look at it, even down to Maxey and their shooting percentages and everything like that, when he's not around, it's just tougher for him. And it's crazy. Like, guys before they played well without him, but now they're starting to struggle. It's like they're just not doing it. They're settling for shots that they shouldn't settle for.
It's slightly different, but the first NBA team that I covered in any capacity was the Brooklyn Nets, and it always amused me how people would say Brook Lopez is a terrible rebounder, awful rebounder. Every single year, consistently, the Nets as a team rebounded better when Brook Lopez was on the floor. And yeah, he was only grabbing 5 or 6 boards a game, but he was boxing out 2 guys on every possession, right? And so it's the kind of thing where, yeah, maybe just adding someone like Joel Embiid back in the lineup helps the Sixers score in the paint because he's really good at scoring in the paint. But there's also the element of it's harder to see the photo negative, right? Of what does it look like when the guy's out of the game. But certainly that was one that I clued in very early in my writing career of, hey, he might not get, the box score number rebounds, but the team always rebounds better when he's playing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, it's the same way, when it comes down to points in the paint, because Maxey is easier for him to get to the basket, it's easier for VJ, although Embiid and VJ were kind of like, they both like the same spot on the floor, so it's harder, but, it just frees everything up for everyone. Like Paul George said on Tuesday night, Joel Embiid is their trump card. Like having him out there on the floor enables them to do certain things that they can't when he doesn't play.
Yeah, a player of that magnitude and of that range of skills and things that it just opens up so much.
Mm-hmm.
That's and the point you were making earlier about how they're the most dangerous team. That assuming health, which is a huge assumption when it comes to the Sixers, it's going to get better and better. And by the time you get to the playoffs, wow, watch out.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, but again, they gotta be consistent and be, hungry and things like that, because and they also have to, on the defensive end, they have to shore up these dribble drops. Like they can't allow guys of that skill set to continue to get 30-point performances against.
Yeah, and it's not the same for when Embiid was at his peak and he could erase everything that
Exactly.
got in there. We don't expect him to get to that level again.
Yeah, pretty not. You know what? I don't know. I don't, and that's not a knock.
No.
It's just that to me, I feel like it's hard when, first of all, you're getting older. Second of all, you had 2 knee surgeries, left knee surgeries in 14 months, and 3 in 9 years. I mean, that's tough.
Yeah,
that's tough for a player to overcome.
Sat out your first 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it's always been an issue, and as he gets older, it's more and more of an issue. And it's remarkable that he's been able to come back at the level that he has.
Yeah.
I'm curious on the dribble drive stuff in particular, and obviously, health is going to be the main driver here. But do you think that's something that, more Kelly Oubre minutes might fix, just because the guard rotation, it's very short? I mean, Quentin Grimes, 6'4", VJ Edgecombe, 6'4", Tyrese Maxey, 6'3", Jared McCain, 6'3", right? It's a lot of combo guards who are on the smaller side of combo guards. Do you think that, just more minutes from larger wing players like Oubre and Paul George might help with that?
Definitely, because in the beginning of the season, Kelly Oubre's assignment was to guard the opposing team's best perimeter player and then play with energy, right? And do other things. And then Kelly messed up his knee. He had injured his knee. So what happened is he missed 22 consecutive games. And, people were just feasting on him. And not only that, Paul George. Before, Paul George was looked upon to also guard, elite perimeter players as well. And he was injured, so it was one of those things now that the key is one of those things where you have those 2 guys, and then Quentin Grimes is a better defender than you think, right? So when you add those guys into the mix and the rotation, then it will help them out. But I do think what you talked about Kelly, because that's his role, guard the opposing team's best perimeter player. Now you're going to give up some points, but what you're doing is you're going to enable, by you doing that, is going to enable Maxey when he's on the floor with you to be able to take more chances and get in those passing lanes and get steals. But at the same time, you got someone trying to impede someone. And another problem is like that also, the reason why it also helps is because, Embiid is still injured, right? Oh, I shouldn't say still injured, but defensively, he is still not where he should be. So in the past, when guys were scared to come in the middle, like they're like, forget that. Now I'm trying to get a dunk, right? And like I've never dunked on Joel Embiid before, so let me try to get one now. Like, you know what I mean? It's one of those things. And another problem that they have is when Adem Bona, who is their shot blocker, but he's too eager at times. So what happens is now what he gives up is he comes over and he tries to double and he's jumping in the air. And what the point guard will do is do a wraparound or a quick pass, and then the center is getting in an uncontested dunk. So that's the problem they have. But if you have Kelly, he'll help certain things, but they also need better defense on the back end. You know what I mean? You need some on the back end. And as much as I love Andre Drummond's rebounding, he's an elite rebounder, the best one on the team. Per 36 minutes, he's number 2 in the NBA behind Mitchell Robinson and rebounding. But he's not a great, stop and penetration defender. So he has his role. But if Embiid could play a little bit better and you have Kelly Oubre face guarding somebody or like not face guard, but like, making sure they don't penetrate, it's going to get better. But they have to play more disciplined on the back end when it comes down to a Dembo.
So a number of the things that you've mentioned made me think of the coaching matchup. Okay. And, to what extent you have a coach who has, made his name by creativity, among other things, and has been very successful in the association, has come under some criticism this year. But the types of combinations and the way players are playing off each other and the things that the team is trying to do, seems like coach is playing a pretty big role in that, as opposed to with the Kings, where they have, in effect, a rookie coach. And has been really, obviously was a great player, a lot of emphasis on defense. The players like and respect him, but strategically, he's really been outcoached, and it's not really his fault, right? He's going against veteran coaches who really, he's never been called on to do this before. He was an assistant coach for a short period, but I'm interested in that kind of matchup, or that kind of coaching styles against each other. But back to, what difference has the head coach made in making that collection of players with different skills and a constantly changing who's available? How's that work?
I think it worked out well. Now, here's the thing about Nick Nurse. The people in Philadelphia, Philly is a rough place, right?
Yes.
So, it's rough. I mean, I'm a Philadelphian, so I know, because I've been rough on people too. But
Mo Howard, by the way, made me an honorary Philadelphian, just so you know.
Okay. So you're rough too, huh? So here's the deal. Like, when we look at it, I think that Nick Nurse hasn't really gotten a lot of credit because of, and I know people will say, well, look at the team, they may have underachieved or whatever. But from the day he showed up, he had to deal with the James Harden situation. And then he deals with the Joel Embiid injuries and now Paul George injuries. And so it's always, he never had like a full healthy group until right now, or a non-disgruntled group until now, right? So when you look at it, you saw that he had to do a lot of mix and matches, doing these crazy lineups. And all this is just to figure out, what do you have, what's going to work, and I'm trying to win games, right? Now, are there certain things that he could have done better? Yes. There's certain things that we all could have done better, right? But I feel like sometimes you have to gamble to see it, and that there's going to be certain shortcomings or there's going to be, things that not really going to work out well. But I'm going to live with that just because I know if I don't do this, we're going to get blown out, right? I mean, and that's what he's done, right? So I do think that what he's going to probably do is we're going to see some crazy like rotations. We're going to see guys on the floor and they're going to be like, what are they doing? And what he typically does is he comes out and he makes you make adjustments in the third quarter, right? You got to come out and make adjustments. Now, some coaches, the real good ones, have been able to come out and do something different and go on a run on the Sixers. And then you find out Nick then has to go and talk to his coaches and they come out with something different in the fourth and they make a run. And next thing you know is a close game and whoever wins, wins. So I think that's going to be the key because the 76ers are going to do some things and it's going to be up to the Kings coaching staff to see what they can do and come out in the third quarter and try to solve this puzzle, so to speak, and get an advantage on,
Well, there's been a lot of games this year where that has happened, where adjustments have been made by the Kings opponents and no counter was visible.
Yeah.
And there was no change or any sort of adjustment made from what had happened in the first half. And the third quarter was the demise of the Kings. Now, when that didn't happen, it was the fourth quarter. So it's like this last game against the Knicks, it was 32-15 in the fourth quarter after being tied at the end of three. But usually it's at the end of halftime when the adjustments are being made by the opposition coaching staff and not really responded to very well by the Kings.
And the thing about it is, the 76ers, I don't know where they rank in third quarters, but they are horrible. Like typically. So if you make the proper adjustments, they tend to like go down big. I mean, it's like it's horrible how it's like they forgot how to play basketball at certain times, right?
A few days ago, I read they were 30th in the league.
Yeah. See, I mean, it's one of those things. It's for the taking, right? It's really for the taking. But I do. The weird thing about the Kings, and I know you guys want to talk about this a little later, but the weird thing about the Kings, if I'm the 76ers and if you take the coaching out of it, I'm a little concerned if I'm the 76ers because the Kings are coming in here a 6-game losing streak, but they have certain guys who are known for having big games up against the Sixers. And when we look at, the skill set, we're talking about, a Zach LaVine, a guy who, traditionally has come to Philadelphia and put on a show. Like, his career average against a particular team, any team, is 24 points against New Jersey and the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? But against the Sixers, and I've witnessed it, he's been dropping bombs and he's averaging 22.8. But then you look at some other players too, like, that have had phenomenal games against them. So it's one of those things where I'm kind of like, if I'm the Sixers, I'm looking at this like, look, we lost to the Charlotte Hornets. I know they're turning stuff around, but we also lost to the Denver Nuggets, who played without their entire starting lineup and 8 players total, right? So when you look at if I'm the Sacramento Kings, I'm looking at this one like, yo, we got to get off this snide right now, and let's just get physical and let's run, let's do whatever we can to get this victory. It's a desperate team right about now. So to me, and then here's something else. The 76ers on Saturday, they're going to honor their 2001 team that made it to the NBA Finals. And that's supposed to be the big celebration and all this. This game has trap game written all over it, in my opinion.
Well, unfortunately, the Kings have not been quite that great at catching teams in those traps when they've come up. They've been one of Ray's favorite stats of this season has been that the Kings have actually been pretty solid in games where the other team is on the second night of a back-to-back and they're also missing 3+ starters. So in that subset of games, the Kings had been doing quite well until recently. They had one of those against Miami, and that was part of that 6-game losing streak. So we'll see how it turns out. But certainly Kelly Oubre being back, I think, makes things a lot harder for the Kings because, DeMar DeRozan will shoot over a smaller guard in, 13 to 15 feet, out of the post all day long. And so the fact that the Sixers now have their, main guy for we're going to stick you on the other team's best perimeter player and just shut him out of the game, it certainly looked a lot better for the Kings if Kelly Oubre was not going to play than if he is going to be around.
Yeah. I mean, I got it. I have it. But what matchup do you guys like, though? Any?
That is always the question with the Kings game.
So, how much dependence does Coach Nurse place on the analytics staff?
I don't know. I don't know if it's a lot. Like, I know they all use analytics, but I think that with this particular team, you look at what they have, and a lot of it is placed on Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, right? And then you look at it and you say, okay, Paul, you're going to be the third, and some nights you might even be the fourth guy, right? But we need you to play quality defense, and we need you to, to be a facilitator. So the thing about the 76ers, when we talk about analytics, analytics a lot is let's get a lot of threes, let's do a lot of things like that. The Sixers have been hit and miss in threes, and actually they've been more missing than hitting in threes. So when we talk about the analytics, it's like, yeah, you want to try to do it, but it's just not working. But the one thing is you have that Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. And the one thing I will say that Nick Nurse has been, he's been great for Maxey's career because what he tells him is, I want you shooting the ball. Like, there was a time when Maxey first became the starter when James Harden left, and he was the guy. And Maxey was like, well, I want to get, everybody else want to get them. No. Shoot the ball. Shoot the ball. Yeah. So when we talk about analytics, that's cool. But, and he is shooting threes and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's more or less, look, bruh, you're going to play the most minutes in the league. I want you out there firing. So it's kind of like,
yeah.
What
kind of made me think of that was when you were talking about Kings players that come in and do so well against the Sixers. And the last game that the Kings played against the Knicks, when DeRozan went off and went for 34 and was hitting everything he put up in mid-range, he was 1 for 7 from three-point range. So it's those kinds of things I just was thinking about, to what extent is Coach Nurse depending on being fed all that information and structuring his game plan around those sorts of things.
Yeah. I mean, yes and no, he does. But at the same time, it's more like,
we know what you can do. Go do it.
Yeah, go do it. Just go do it. Just go do it. You know what I mean?
So one of the things also that I thought Nick was going to bring up that has been a huge factor with the Kings this year, and you could say, well, how could anything be a huge factor? They just lose. But in terms of wins versus losses, is minimizing the spread between the opponent's offensive rebounding versus the Kings' defensive rebounding. Has that been a big factor for the Sixers this year?
Yeah, but rebounding has actually been a problem for them, especially if they go up against a team with 2 solid bigs, right? Now you would think like Andre Drummond is a pretty good rebounder, but like prime example, when they won against the Knicks, he didn't even play. He didn't play against the Milwaukee Bucks, right? So it's kind of like, and then you have Joel. He had 9 rebounds against the Bucks. But for the most part, he's like out in the perimeter. You know what I mean? So, you have guards and everyone else getting all these boards. So that's been a problem. And especially the biggest problem is keeping opposing teams off the offensive glass. You know what I mean? Like if you have a quality offensive rebounder, they're just going to get more possessions out of it, right? A lot of second chance points. So they've been struggling in that category.
Well, the good news from the Kings' perspective is that both of their best offensive rebounders are probably going to play in this game in Domantas Sabonis and rookie Dylan Cardwell, who has been a revelation, who Ray and I have talked about plenty because he's been one of the few bright spots on the team. But generally speaking, the Kings are 27th in rebounding, but slightly better in offensive than defensive. So that might play a factor. There is one other stat that I thought was interesting, which is what I thought Ray was saying he thought I was going to bring up, which is the Kings have started to regress more towards where we would have expected them to be, but they've been in the top 10 in opposing 3-point percentage for most of this season. The last 5 years, they have not ranked above 26th, and they've had multiple 29th in the league and 130th in the league in terms of opposing 3-point shooting. So interesting that they're starting to go back to the poor 3-point defense that we were expecting, but that has been a recent trend in this 6-game losing streak, has really been when they've had that drop in 3-point defense, because for the early part of the year, Ray and I were dumbfounded every time we looked and saw somehow this Kings defense was top 10 in 3-point percentage.
Yeah, that's not a good matchup for tomorrow then.
Not quite.
For years we've been trying to figure out, is it scheme, is it personnel, or is it effort, right? Because I can't think of another team, and granted I watch the Kings more than others, but I can't think of another team that leaves 3-point shooters unguarded or uncontested as much as the Kings do. It's just, you typically look up and wait a minute, there's no rule that says you can't be within 5 feet of the 3-point shooter.
Yeah, it could get ugly then. But the Sixers give up a lot of threes too, but it could get ugly.
Luckily for them, the Kings are dead last in 3-pointers and 3-point attempts. So
that's what I'm saying. They give up. That's why I paused and said it could get ugly, because I'm like, I don't see a lot of 3-point attempt takers. Like, you know what I mean? I see a lot of slashers. Yeah.
It's Levine, it's Monk, who probably isn't going to play with his injury. It's Keegan Murray, who is definitely not going to play with his injury. And it's Keon Ellis, who, unfortunately for Ray and I, may very well be traded by the time this game happens.
Yeah, what are you hearing or sensing or trying to understand about the fact that Keon Ellis has been buried on the bench when he's the best defender on the team and is for his career 40+% 3-point shooter? No one in Sacramento, other than was Mike Brown and now Christie, no one else can figure out why he doesn't get to play very much. Have you heard much about that or thought much about that?
It was bizarre too, because I look at him and you're like, dang, what did he do? Like, what did he
exactly?
Like, yo, did he curse him out, or what? Like, did he sit in his seat? Like, what did he do? Yeah. I don't know. It's bizarre to me, but I don't know. I think he's a really good player.
Oh, I do too. He's just yeah. I mean, when you're the best defender and you're the best 3-point shooter and you don't get to play, there's something amiss there, and no one can quite figure out what it is. Yeah. So, Nick, did you have anything further you wanted to raise?
No, I think that covers it. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Really appreciate it.
If there's anything he had that he wants to, that we didn't cover.
I'm going to say this, y'all. This is the one matchup that I really want to see. I want to see Sabonis and Embiid.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the reason being is, Sabonis, like, we talk about the rebounding and everything like that. Like, I think that he could have a big game. Now, I don't know if it's a big enough game for them to get the victory, but I feel like he could have a big game on the boards. And he was one of those centers in the past when Embiid was, a MVP caliber player who had quality games against his Joel. So I'm really looking forward to this. And I know, Joel's 7'2", Sabonis is 6'11". Joel is a bigger guy, you know what I mean? But Sabonis has always had success against him. Always.
Yeah,
So,
he's been a little bit limited since he came back from his injury.
yeah. So that's
yeah.
that's the question mark.
Yeah,
But
it is, and he's getting better and better. But
yeah,
he missed, what was it, 22 days, Nick, something like that.
Yeah, he's missed the majority of the season for the Kings, but it's been in two
he's
separate
getting,
stretches.
more and more to be the old Sabonis. I shouldn't say the former Sabonis.
but if he could do something, I would like to see it, because in the past it was, when Indiana, even back even Indiana days, he had great games against Embiid. It was something to see.
Well, thanks so much, Keith. We really appreciate you doing this, and I know that our fans here in Sacramento will definitely appreciate all the insights that you were able to share with us. So thank you.
And thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.